Hey class, so this video tutorial will be about Illustrator type. So if you look in the toolbox here, Illustrator has a few type tools. The first type tool is just the regular horizontal type tool. Then we have a type on a path tool, and we also have a vertical type tool. So the vertical type tool would be used for languages where type is set vertically. We're talking Hebrew or Arabic. So some of those languages, in Chinese maybe, they set their type vertically, whereas in most English and Latin nations, we type it horizontally. So I'm going to stick with this type tool here. And the type tool is really all you need. You'll notice that you move your cursor onto the artboard, that you have this I-beam with a small cursor. So there's two ways to use the type tool in Illustrator. You can see here on this artboard I have point type and area type. So let's take a look at point type. So point type is literally you just click once. That'll give you an I-beam. And Illustrator also gives you some default placeholder text now. So that was released in a couple of versions ago. So I'm going to select this text and just move it. So with point type, you can create text and you can format it. So I have a font here, and all my controls are up here. So to get to these controls, you can go to the window menu, down to control. Also, if you have your properties panel open over here on the right, you can select and change all of the different properties for the font family, the font style. We have the font size, the leading. This will be the kerning, the spacing between, the tracking values, and there's some additional options. Also, I've switched my workspace to the typography workspace, which gives me access to all these toolboxes. So the character panel, the paragraph panel, the open type panel, and some additional panels that are good for working with type. So going back to point type, the limitation with point type is that if I go ahead and select here, that there's no end to this. I can just keep typing all the way across the screen, and it doesn't have a definitive area. It doesn't have a defined box. So that's point type. I'm just going to adjust this and make it a little bit smaller. So you'll see here that there's a small icon in the middle, and this is with the alignment of the text, and there are some keyboard shortcuts for the alignment. So Command-Shift-L will align it to the left. Command-Shift-R will align to the right. Command-Shift-C will align to the center. And I've also listed some other keyboard shortcuts here for making text larger. So if I go ahead and select the text, I can hit Command-Shift in the right bracket, which is also the period key on your keyboard. That'll make the text larger. Command-Shift and the left bracket, which is the comma key on the keyboard. That'll make the text smaller. And then if you hold down the Option key and hit the right arrow key, that'll increase the amount of tracking in the text. And hit Option and the left arrow key will decrease the amount of tracking in the text. Obviously, too much tracking is not going to be really readable, and too little tracking is definitely not going to be readable. So you can see over here that those values are changing in the character panel here. So I can just go ahead and set that back to 0. Type color is controlled by whatever the fill color is. Some people use stroke colors, but generally it's the fill color that's going to determine what the color of the text is. Okay, so that's point type. Now let's take a look at area type. So with area type, area type is when you have your cursor, you're ready to make some text, but this time you create a bounding box with that text. So I'm going to click and drag this time, and notice I'm getting some width and height information. So I'll make this like 2.75, and that's going to give me some lorem ipsum text again. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. And then you also have this option here to go to the type menu. The type menu has many of the options that you see in some of the panels, but you can also fill with placeholder text, and I'll just fill it with some lorem ipsum text. I can select all that text. I'm going to align it to the left. Command-Shift-L to align it to the left. And with all the text selected, A couple other shortcuts for you. So if I hit Option and the up arrow, it's going to decrease the leading value. And if I hit Option and the down arrow, it's going to increase the leading value. So with this particular area type text, you notice that if I go ahead and select it, that I get these additional controls. You can have multiple boxes with text, and just like in InDesign and Quark Express and some of the other layout programs, you can set the in and out points for text, and you can control the flow of the text from one text box to another. I just wanted to show you this if you wanted to define an area. And what happens here is if I continue typing, eventually it's going to get to a place where I get text that's being overflowed and I can't see that text, and you'll have this red indication here that there's additional text that can't be seen. The regular selection tool, notice that when I click this box, let me get rid of this, that it became a loaded cursor. With that loaded cursor now I can create another text box, and it's going to link the two text boxes, so it's going to continue to flow from one to the next. So if I would make this box smaller, you see what's happening here. The text is flowing into the next text box. Okay, so that's area type. Area type can also be put into objects. Any object that you draw, triangle, rectangle, circle, what I have here. So if we grab the type tool again, if I move my cursor over this object, notice I get this weird cursor. It looks like the type tool, but it will recognize this shape, and what it'll do is it'll dump text into that shape. Notice that you do not have the shape anymore. The shape is converted into the text box. I'll do the same thing over here. So now I don't have a circle anymore. I have text that's in the shape of a circle. So that's another thing you can do with area type. Okay. Going down now, type on a path. Here I have a couple of different paths. I have this freeform path, it's an open path, and then I have this circle. So what if we want a text that's going to flow on these and follow the contour? So we could switch to this tool, and it will just do that for you, but you can stay with the type tool, because when I move my cursor over this path, you notice what happens here. Because it's an open path, it automatically recognizes that it's a path, and it's going to allow me to put type on the path. So I'm going to click once, and that gives me this type on a path. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so with this type on a path, if I grab my direct selection tool, you notice that we have a couple of things here. We have an in point, and we have an out point, and then we have the center point. So with this center point, what I can do is I can click and drag to control where the text sits along the path. If I click and drag it past the path, it'll flip it over to the other side. Okay. So that's you can also control this endpoint, and that's so how much on the path it's going to sit. That way I can just move this around a little bit more. So that's type on a path for here. For a circle, when I grab the text tool and I move my cursor on the circle, it's not going to give me that icon that I saw over here, because it sees this as an object, it's a closed path, therefore it wants to put the text inside the path. However, if you hold down the Option key on the keyboard and I move my cursor over this, it's going to put text all around the circle. And again, grabbing the direct selection tool will then allow me to control whether or not the text is inside or outside of the circle, and then control where on the circle the text is going to sit. So that's type on a path. Okay, next up is envelope distort. So you see here I have two objects on the artboard. I have a shape that I drew. It was basically two boxes, and I just converted the intersect here, and then I have some text. Now with this feature, it's important that the object is on top of the text, so you want to make sure that this is on top. So if I go to Object, to Arrange, to bring to front. That'll bring that to the frontmost. And I'm going to select both objects. And then I'm going to go to the Object menu, down to Envelope Distort. And I'm going to choose Make with Top Object. What that'll do is take the text and move it inside of the actual shape. Now that text is still editable. If I go ahead and double click here, I can change this word. And then I can click away. And I still have the text in the Envelope Distort. Okay, the last thing I wanted to show you here is the Warp feature, which is an effect. So I have some text selected here. And if I go to Effect to Warp and choose a Warp effect, you'll see that I have a preview here. And should be able to turn on the preview. It shows me what that's going to look like. And then we can choose other effects from this drop-down list. And I'll just increase this. Gives you a sense of what this tool can do. Because sometimes you want to adjust the text and move it around, but there's not an interactive way to do that. So this effect allows you to do that. And the nice thing about this is that that text is still editable. If I move my cursor over it, you can see this blue highlight. If I double click on that, I can change the text and it will still be distorted in the way that the Warp tool did it. One other thing to just bear in mind is that with all these effects, if you go to the Window menu to Appearance, they get held in the Appearance panel. So if I turn off the appearance, it'll just turn off the effect. If I turn it back on, you'll see the effect again. And if I didn't want that effect to be applied to this text anymore, I can hit the trash can icon on the appearance, and then I can just have the regular text. So these are some of the text options. There's certainly more that you can do with text. We'll do a follow-up on this, but this will give you a general direction for working with type in Illustrator.